Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm Ffinlo Costain. New economic analysis demonstrates that the current agricultural budget of £3.5 billion cannot deliver the UK's legally binding climate and nature targets. The independent analysis, A Scale of Need, says that the farming budget must instead rise to £5.9 billion a year. The report was commissioned by the RSPB, the National Trust and the Wildlife Trusts. I spoke to Alice Groom, Head of Sustainable Land Policy in England for the RSPB, and I started by asking her to explain where the £5.9 billion figure comes from.
So the Wildlife Trust, the RSPB and the National Trust commissioned an independent economic advisor to build us a model. And this enables us to understand the investment needed to meet those vital nature and climate targets. So the model incorporates the best available data available on all of the different land management activities that are required to meet those nature and climate targets. This model was originally built in 2017, and we've worked on it several times over that period. This version gives us the most accurate estimate yet.
Could you give me an example of some of those practices or outcomes that this amount of money would pay for?
So one of the really, really important targets that we need to meet is this 2030 species abundance target in England. And for example, one of the really critical actions that farmers and other land managers can do is to manage 10% of their farm under kind of nature-friendly options. So that might be introducing seed-rich habitats or flower-rich habitats, thick hedges, and managing ditches. So there's vegetation and pollen and nectar for insects.
So are these compensation payments for land taken out of food production alongside payments for delivery activities?
So the way the model works is it's an investment in a whole range of activities. So a lot of them include things like cover cropping and integrated pest management and moving to sort of lower tillage systems. So funding activities that boost the sustainability of farming. And then others like flower-rich habitats we know will boost beneficial insects, which will also benefit food production as well. So it's not just about taking land out of production, it's just about fundamentally investing in a sustainable regenerative food and farming system.
We're still awaiting legislation, of course, in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. But in England, are you also recommending a revision of ELMS so that there's not just more money, but a higher percentage of the funding pot going into regenerative and agroecological farming practices?
Yeah, so in England, we think that DEFRA needs to sharpen up the sustainable farming incentive to make sure it's really funding those activities that will support farmers to become regenerative and agroecological. So things like integrated pest management, introducing those wildflower habitats, introducing cover cropping, but really whole farm, thinking about that whole farm, not just a small number of tweaks, because that's what we know needs to happen and can build really resilient farming systems, farming businesses. But we also need to see a much greater investment in the higher tier. And we know that will be so critical for supporting upland and marginal farming systems who can deliver a whole range of benefits for nature and particularly critical for achieving net zero.
When you say a whole farm payment, are you recommending blanket payments in return for basic stewardship and then additional payments through ELMS for higher level activities?
So when I say whole farm, it's more about how the scheme is designed to try and encourage farmers to put together the action. So rather than a blanket payment, it's more about making sure there's a plan, there's an assessment, and that we're encouraging farmers to develop those kind of agroecological models and thinking. So thinking about nutrients, thinking about nature, thinking about water usage, all of those together, because combined, these actions are greater than the sum of their parts.
Now, many would say that farming in balance with nature, which obviously increases resilience and reduces the need for costly fossil fuel inputs, is simply good business sense. So to what extent should the farmer, rather than the taxpayer, be funding the transition?
So we know that nature-friendly farming can be profitable, but we also know that a lot of these activities will require change in the farming system at a time when farmers are experiencing the shocks of climate change and the loss of nature. And we know these vital environmental goods and services are not paid for at the till. So that price that we pay for food in the supermarket, for example. So we know that there is a cost and an investment need attached to a lot of these actions. And that's why we're making the case that we need this money, we need this vital investment in our farming systems.
Now, the government has been clear that funding in the short to medium term will be extremely tight and that economic growth is the best way to fuel the economy. Are there other ways to make up what the report identifies as a funding shortfall, for example, through a scaled up natural capital marketplace?
Yeah, so we know we need public money and we need real certainty about a budget. That's really critical and something that really needs to come out of the spending review. But there is a role for private finance here. And we are seeing regulated markets like biodiversity net gain and nutrient neutrality come online. And there are non-regulated markets like the carbon markets, but they're still in that kind of fledgling stage and they really need to scale. And so I don't think government can kind of completely they don't have a get out of jail free card, because they have an important role in finding that public finance, but also making sure that those private markets are grown as well.
Again, thinking about the economic landscape, how have you been making the case for more cash to government ministers?
Well, this is a crucial investment in our national infrastructure, so our vital natural capital. We've had warnings from a range of people that the loss of nature and climate change, it could cause economic shocks far greater than COVID and the economic crash combined. It could lead to up to a 12% decline in our GDP. So we really can't afford not to invest in nature-friendly farming and land management.
That was Alice Groom from the RSPB. More news as ever on our website 8point9.com. That's all for now. We're back soon. Thanks for watching.